they shortened it to Rabbit Island after that. Why is it important? Well, that point right there has got an old traditional campsite, the point we just passed. There's never been any archaeology done there, but my guess is that if we put a couple of shovels in the ground there and dug, we'd probably find lots of artifacts. Back up that creek, you can paddle up right away. There's a little bit of a wetland up there. But back in the old days, Waboos or Rabbit Island was a gathering place of berries and certain types of medicines for both the Cree and the Ojibwe. So there's another name that we should think about repatriating back onto today's maps. Convert it over to Waboos Island and put the language back on the map. Waboos. And what's Waboos? When you think of Waboos, who else do you think of? My dad. Yeah, you think of supper. You also think of Nanabojo, Winnabojo, Nanabush, Wabojo, Waboos, because the other name for Nanabojo is the great white hare. That's one of his, he's a shapeshifter. So that's one of his disguises. And so when I think of Waboos Island, I also think of Nanabojo. He's the guy that gave us birch bark, birch bark canoes, gave us fire. He looked after the people. Probably an old campsite right up in there. I've never been ashore on this little island, but it sure looks like one back in the middle of that island there. Maybe later this year I'll flat day and go over that, right? So we're following the north channel around Rabbit Island, Waboos Island, and up in here where you see this cabin in front of us, this is what most people on the lake call the Narrows. There are lots of Narrows, but this is the Narrows. And there's an archaeology site up here I'm going to stop and drift for a while and talk about. It's called the deuxième site. It's a French word that means second. And we don't know where Thor Conway came up with that name. It might have been the second place that he did a dig. It's on your map. It's the newest or the most recent archaeology site. It dates back to the 1400s. But it's a really important site for a couple of reasons that we're going to discuss once we get through the Narrows. So there's a couple of families from Sudbury that bought this property, and they have two cabins here. And the original dig where Conway and his wife Julie did the test pits and they found the artifacts was right next to one of the cabins back in the 1970s, late 1970s. So these guys have a family cabin on sacred land, a land that was utilized in the spring for fishing, way back in the day, long, long, long ago, time immemorial.
When they bought it, did they realize what they were buying?
I don't know. When I bought Missanabie, I had no idea I was buying a sacred island. And I'll come to that when we come by the island. The island when we bought it was unnamed, and because I was doing a lot of work with Missanabie, and I went to the Geographic Naming Board and petitioned for them to give it a name, and we called it Missanabie Island, which means low rocky island in Ojibwe. If I had more of a contact with Missanabie Cree, I might have reconsidered that name and also offered a Cree translation for the same island. But that was what my wife Kathy and I did to try to start the process. It took about a year and a half, and we sent letters to all the local First Nations, Batchewana, Pickbogert, Missanabie Cree, Missanabie, Garden River, and we didn't get any replies from any of the First Nations, but we knew in our hearts we were doing the right thing, and the naming board put it through. So you'll notice now if you buy a new updated map, it's got a name to it, an Ojibwe name. grandmother 4 generations back that's Ojibwe, but I don't. I've got a little tiny bit of native blood in me. Not enough to sneeze at.
But a lot of native heart.
Yeah.
What got me involved with this was when I was still in practice. I looked after a guy with a really bad heart condition, and he ran a wilderness canoe group. And one of their members dropped out, and they were looking for another guy, and I was a family doctor, and I was his doctor. So he was really keen on having me come along on these canoe trips. The very first set of pictographs I saw were at Little Missanabie, and I knew this is where I belong. I knew the pictographs were what I should be doing, and the first date I had with my wife, we spent a week at Ferry Point on Big Miss, and that just reinforced it.
So practice in the north?
No, I practiced down south in the Hamilton area. I graduated from McMaster, and I stayed close to home. Both of my parents were sick at the time. So this is the narrow. It's right here, guys. We're going to get past this little point on the right, and then we're going to duck into this bay. It's pretty shallow, so we won't be able to drift for too long. The archaeology site is on a beach just over here to our right. The Deuxième site. Still there.
I didn't fall out. I think I could swim to it. Maybe when I was younger, I'd love to swim.
We're going to duck around the corner and we'll stop our engines and raft up and drift. Archaeology site back in there. If you're looking for a brand new prop for your boat, on a flat day, go out to that white buoy right ahead of us. And just take your snorkel mask and have a little look around. You'll find 6 or 7 brand new props attached to the lower end.
Oh dear.
So if you know what you're looking for, you can see the dogleg pictographs from here. You can see Missanabie Island. If you see those big rocky cliffs, the little shorter one on the right-hand side is the dog. And you'll start to be able to recognize the dog's head when we get a little closer. Take a look behind your right shoulder. You'll see the beach where your archaeology site was. The dig was done just to the left of that cabin.
Don't run into us.
So a little bit of brutal 20th century history. Right ahead of us is the old Illinois Boys Camp. And people that have lived on the lake have heard the story about this place. It's still in the courts right now, but there were many allegations of corporal punishment, people that were being bad, that were tied to that little rocky knoll out there with no clothes on in the middle of the summer and chewed up by mosquitoes. There were lots of sexual assault innuendos. There was an American-run church, group. we just throw a rotator just around one of these posts. You guys can hear.